I'm going to talk a little bit today about brand marketing. We've, particularly on, why brand marketing remains a critically important part of any growth strategy, how everything we've heard about today, the kind of rapid rise of AI is changing how we think about brand strategy, and some early thoughts on how we can kind of lean into being able to address that and address those changes. I'm Jon Ewing. I head up marketing at Dun & Bradstreet. For those of you who don't know us, very briefly, we're a data company. We have our primary asset is a database of about 600 million businesses around the world. And of each of those businesses, we have thousands of additional data points that we can use to enrich your first-party data for marketing, for sales, for supply chain, for compliance, for risk, for all sorts of reasons. And in the zeitgeist of the day, we launched our first agent today, which is a business lookup agent, where if you give it a business name, it'll begin returning you a ton of that information. So we're very proud about it. I think it's worth level setting a little bit on what we mean by brand, right? But I think brand is one of those terms where lots and lots of people have lots and lots of different ideas. And so just to kind of set the scene of how I think about it, I come back to one of the definitions of marketing that I hear often, which is that marketing in a business has two jobs. Job number one is demand capture, and job number two is demand generation. Demand capture is all the things we all know and love: search, intent, capturing people who are out there actively looking for your products and your services today. And it has really been driven by search, as well as things like Bombora and Foundry and all those other kind of data assets that have helped drive intent. Demand generation in the future is much more around the sort of realm of brand marketing. And the way I like to think about demand generation is the idea that we're trying to join our brand, our product, our service, whatever it is you guys sell, with in the mind of your audience, in the mind of your addressable market, with those concepts. So when they think about your product, when they think about the space that you operate in, your name is one of the names that comes up. Brand marketing, as many of you who have been involved in it at all will know a little bit about, is much more difficult in a way to justify because it's harder to measure. Particularly, I'm coming very much from a B2B background. This will predominantly be, I'll be predominantly talking about B2B. But for some of our buying cycles for our customers is measured in years, if not decades, right? It can be 10 years before you change your CRM system. It can be 15 years before you change your databases, right? These are very, very long buying cycles. And because of that, brand activity and brand activation is difficult to measure over that time. But one of the ways, at least from a narrative point of view, that I talk about it with my CFO in particular, who is the person I most have to persuade that this is a valuable thing to do, comes from some research that came out, I want to say earlier this year, or probably back end of last year. Both Gartner and Forrester published a report. They were very, very similar in terms of the data that came out. So I'm sort of summarizing the gist of what they both said. And what they were looking at was RFPs issued in America in 2023, I think it was. And they looked at tens of thousands of RFPs, and what they came up with was the average RFP issued by business has 4 vendors on it. The average executive kicking off that RFP, not the procurement team, but the CFO, the CMO, whoever it might be, already knew 3 of those vendors before they started, and the majority of time already knew which vendor they wanted to pick before they issued the RFP, right? Don't fixate on RFPs. This happens for I'm sure all of us have been involved in purchasing decisions in our businesses. We don't always issue RFPs, but the same idea fits. The same idea that most people know the businesses they want to go and talk to, the products they want to go look at before they start this process. And so for me, the job of brand marketing is to make sure that my business is one of those 3, right? If not, if I fail at brand marketing, then my business, my sales team, when they're out in the market, are scrabbling around for that 4th position. And you don't want to be doing that. That's the also-rans. The job of brand marketing is in the minds of your addressable market that you are tied to being one of those 3 vendors that the CFO or the CMO or the chief people officer already knows when they issue the RFP. So how have we done that over the time? Historically, pre-AI, the ways we used to do this, and a lot of this remains the same, but the way I think about it, the things we need to do: simple, clear messaging, right? That is absolutely central to what we have to do. Very, very simple messaging that aligns your business or your product with your category. If you have a number of categories, if you have a number of different kind of products, you've got to make sure that they're separated out. even to the point that if your brands are very disparate, if your products are very disparate within your brand, you may want to create sub-brands. I was having this conversation last week internally for our business. We sell, I don't think there's another business on earth that sells credit scores to banks and sells ad tech to the ad tech industry. It's great that we can do it, but it's a really weird brand proposition and a really weird mix of products. And so we're considering the idea of actually beginning to split out into sub-brands and having some of those more kind of clusters of products around in those areas. Repetition is also key with that messaging. Once you've produced that messaging, once you've got it out there, you need to get it in front of people, and you need to get it out in front of people again and again and again and again and again. And the way you do repetition is all the kind of classic things we've worked on in marketing for years. So traditional media, programmatic advertising, search is in the mix, social media is a big part of it, and so on, right? The second point is around there are specific times when buyers are more receptive, and industry events is a great example of this, right? People who go to events, they are in the mood to learn, to understand, to kind of understand where the market's going. And so this is why I think event strategies have been so important as part of brand strategy over the years. And then helpfully, Seth talked a lot about this morning, which was great, third-party validation. And I think third-party validation is really, really key when you come to brand. It's, people trust to a certain extent what you say about your brand. People really trust what other people say about your brand. And so that runs the gamut from industry analysts, Forrester, Waves, and Gartner, the equivalent. And then social media, and then review sites, and Reddit, and all of those places. These are really, really key. So I'm very, very pleased that there's such a focus on that coming in Conductor in the next few weeks and months. But what's changed from all of this is that all the things we've heard about today a number of times. Zero-click searches, right? People are not clicking through as often as they used to. But one of the other implications of that is people are seeing fewer ads, right? People are spending less time on websites. So certainly programmatic, people are getting, actually there are just less ad impressions because there are less people viewing pages where those ads are being served. So that's one of those areas where we try and do repetition. The technology is changing underneath us because of the effects of AI. But the second part as well is, again, another piece of research which is either about to come out or has just come out, this time from Forrester, that they've done a lot of work on how B2B buyers research products. And they do this every year. And we were looking a couple of weeks ago at the 2024 versus 2025 guides. And the key thing, one of the big kind of jump outs was that in 2025, 50% of B2B buyers now use Gen AI as their primary source of information, right? The absolutely number one. Up from 27% in 2024. So it's almost doubled in importance, right? And it's taken first place. I think last year it was second place, this year it's first place. Company websites have dropped to second, industry analysts or third-party sources have dropped to fourth. I think that's a little dubious, but that's what the data would seem to say. But if you tie all that together, very clearly, what that means is, if you want to be considered as part of this discussion, you need to be where the buyers are, and the buyers are now moving to the LLMs. So if your content is not visible on the LLMs, or is not being indexed by the LLMs, is not being summarized by the LLMs, and is part of their output, then you are invisible. Those of you who've been around a while will remember the old SEO joke about the best place to hide a body is on the second page of Google search results. I think now you could update that punchline to be the best place to hide a body is on a website that isn't indexed or isn't summarized by LLMs. You're just going to vanish, you're going to disappear. So we're starting now at D&B to kind of think about this, and we're very much kind of we're early stages of the journey of leaning into this, and we're using Conductor pretty much exclusively for driving this. So just to run through the kind of 5 points, we're starting at the business strategy level. And again, this is the point I was talking about earlier about sub-brands. We're really trying to think about what are those topics that we want to be known for. How do we really want to be understood by our market or markets? How do we tie our business, our products, our category in the minds of the people who might well be buying from us? We then analyze our website and we see how we're doing against those topics, right? Great, the topics pages, topic maps are brilliant, really, really great functionality in the roadmap, very exciting to see. We use that extensively to understand how we're doing against those topics. We then produce content regularly to kind of expand our ownership of those topics to make sure that we hopefully dominate them. And then we measure that constantly, what's working, what's not working, and that's a major focus of the team. The other thing we do is we started looking at topic adjacencies. One of my observations about content marketing for the last 10 years has been that one of the benefits of it was that you would produce content for your website, people would come because of the kind of core messaging of that topic. But there were two other things you could do with that content. Number one is you could reinforce your own brand messaging, your positioning within it quite straightforwardly. Again, back to the idea of a simple messaging could be very much cemented into your thought leadership, into your blogs, or whatever it might be. But also there was a lot we could do around stumbling onto other content. We would think very carefully or very consciously about what would be the links we'd have on the side of our thought leadership pieces, the next best article at the bottom. I've certainly used tools, personalization tools, to actually kind of automate and personalize those next article to read in order to really try and make sure people are staying engaged and people are kind of reading more of our content, understanding more about who we are and what we do. LLMs intermediate that, right? We lose both of those possibilities. We lose the nuance of our language, so we can't necessarily reinforce our core messaging because it's being summarized by an LLM. And obviously we're not getting the ability to have our our next best topics kind of included on those pages because people aren't visiting our pages, they're reading it through LLMs. But topic adjacencies kind of allows us to do the same thing. So what's an example of a topic adjacency? If we write about data management, right? Data management is a very key part of what we do. In order to enrich your first party data with our data, you first need to cleanse your database and you need to match up against our primary keys, right? So we talk a lot about that. What are the adjacencies to that? Database technology would be an adjacency to that. How to cleanse your data is an adjacency to that. The importance of a primary key strategy is an adjacency to that. So you build content around the core products or the core messages that you have in order to kind of almost spread out wider the net in which you're capturing people when they're searching for LLMs. And then finally, we make sure that simple messaging is repeated across everything we do, every page, every topic we want to talk about. As we think about that particular topic, we make sure that those simple messages, those simple kind of brand positions are repeated again and again and again. And if we have multiple topics and multiple messages, we make sure that they're reasonably clear and reasonably segmented. As I said earlier, even to the point, if you need to, of having a kind of house of brand strategy where you actually kind of move these under different brands, allowing each brand to own its own topics. So to summarize, the key here, and actually I would argue the hardest part of this for us has been getting the business to align on what are the topics we want to own. We suffer from wanting to be everything to everyone, and I think that, one of the things about AI is it's kind of a lens by which we're having to decide where we really want to play and where we really want to kind of own those spaces. Identify the topics that align with those categories, the content topics, and then produce and measure that content using Conductor to help you ensure you're tracking against that and growing in those spaces. And I love the fact that the new functionality is going to let us look at how we're doing against our competitors, which I think is obviously absolutely key to this. Again, back to the point, if you want to win one of those three coveted spaces in the mind of your buyer, you need to make sure that you're appearing above your competitors in all of these areas, right? And then repeat. I think that's just is my key mantra of marketing is you just got to keep doing it. I often feel like being a marketer is a bit like being a parent where you just have to tell your kids again and again and again to brush their teeth, right? It's the same thing. We need to kind of push that message until it becomes so subliminal in the mind of our buyer that they don't even know why they know our name, but when they think about the category, they think about us. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Any thoughts?
I thought it might be interesting. I'm onboarding your team right
You are.
now, and I feel so I'm the customer success manager on. Here we go.
There you go.
Okay, so I am working on the account with you, onboarding your team, and you guys have done, I think, such a great job of that vision going through everybody who falls under you in the org. So I thought it would be maybe helpful to share with this audience a little bit about how you've kind of led that adoption and led this vision throughout the team.
Yeah, sure. And that's a really, I mean, first of all, thank you. Yes, happy to speak to that. But also, very much a topic of thought at the moment about, and it was really interesting, I thought, in Seth's presentation earlier, one of the slides was about what the future of a content marketing team would look like. And it kind of aligns very much with how we think about it. I do think the structure of a marketing organization is going to be quite different in a couple of years' time than it is now. And I think that's something we're just beginning to think about and lean into. But broadly, I mean, we are a very, very lean marketing team for the size of organization that we are. We're a sort of $1.6, $1.7 billion business, and we're about 24 people in marketing. So relatively small, I think, given the size. We have 3 copywriters. I think the kind of way we've positioned it with the team has been, twofold. Number one is we're not really in a position that we're going to be growing the team massively, but the workload is not going to go down. So we need to provide you tools that are going to help you be more efficient and more productive in terms of what you're doing. Secondly, we made a decision about a year ago. I joined about 14 months ago, and one of the very first things we did was to actually wind down our SEO function within the marketing team and make SEO everyone's responsibility, and from SEO to AEO and GEO, right? So that became a key part of it. We just said this can no longer be a silo. This has to be everyone's role within the organization. So you pull those two together, and suddenly you have a team who are going to start doing a ton more, have to have a focus on SEO, and now are desperate for tools that are going to help them do it. None of them were trained SEO experts, which is where I think Conductor has been so utterly beneficial, that they can come in as a writer, they can use the drafts to produce drafts, they can tweak them, they can change them, but they can be told the score, or the SEO, effectively the SEO or the AEO score from that, which has been hugely valuable to them. So, and I think the last part, and I sort of say this slightly with hesitation and trepidation, but we kind of said to them as well that this is going to be the future of your industry, right? It's going to be difficult to be a content marketer who exclusively is a writer and doesn't use AI tooling. This is going to be how the job goes from now on, and we want to learn with you. We want to do this with you. We want to bring you along on the journey. We're not sort of saying we're going to get rid of you all. We want to train you in the tools that your job is going to have in the future. And I think between all those three, they've been pretty open to well, you tell me, but I think they've been pretty open to learning about it, right? Anything else? Yes.
Thanks, Jon. Very validating to see a lot of my own thoughts on it echoed in the presentation here. One area I really wanted to zoom in on was I loved your point about prioritizing the must-haves and the nice-to-haves for what spaces you want to own.
Yep.
And the next step in that was about testing the levers that improve that mention. Any patterns or anything that you've noticed in what kind of levers have that impact? Because it could be something as simple as changing a word, or we add a brand new page. Do you have any insight into what you've been?
Look, I mean, very early days, so nothing major. I think, and again, what I'll say is I think probably a lot of what you'd hear from a lot of people who are using Conductor to produce the content. I mean, one of the reasons we are so grateful to Conductor is that they've kind of baked in a lot of the kind of current understanding and are evolving that. But it does seem right now that Q&A type content, FAQ type content is hugely important, and comparison content, so us versus the competitors' content. The pages right now that rank highest for our products are not our pages. They are our competitors talking about us versus them. And obviously that means we don't own that conversation, they do. So they seem to be doing extremely well. So we're very much in the process of kind of producing those and being very careful with our legal team to ensure that we're not saying anything we shouldn't. But I think those right now seem to be the key. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Jon. I have a question. A lot of teams here are talking about creating more content than they ever have.
Yep.
What does that mix look like, creating content for organic search models versus what you're actually sending out to your client or customer base? And I'm so curious, too, if anybody else has that metric, because you can't overwhelm, and you don't want unsubscribes, and you don't want people. So what does that mix look like?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting question. And I think there's 2 or 3 ways to think about it. Yes, I think we're probably doing that right now. I think one of the key parts of that, though, is when people are actually visiting the website, you can control the navigation. So you haven't got to expose, obviously, all of this content. You have to expose it somehow, and your sitemap will have it all listed in there and be available to the bots, but you haven't necessarily got to surface every single page to the users. to the visitors. The other thing we're thinking about is whether we actually want to begin surfacing different content depending on the user agent. So if it is a human being, we will show them this page that looks like this. If it is a bot, we will show them the page that looks like this. We're not talking about wildly different content, but perhaps more detail, more kind of granular information on the bot-only page. But actually this comes back to your question a minute ago. I think one of the other things that we're not saying to the writers in our team is increasingly that they are writing for bots, not for people. And that's a kind of weird pivot for their chosen career, which I'm sure none of them really thought about that when they would have started. But I think as we think about that, we are going to have two audiences. We've seen the human audience go down. We've seen the bot audience go up. We believe that will continue. We don't think it'll ever get to zero. And so at some level, we need to produce content for both. And this is a long-winded way of saying we're still figuring that out. Does that help? Good. Any more? Yes.
Love the fact that you talked about democratizing search among multiple individuals. Do you see that happening in any other marketing silos? Only in that performance marketing and so forth, we see a lot of silos and difficulty crossing those. Do you see that kind of happening because of AI?
Yes. That's a long conversation. Yes, I do. I think, again, it will come down to what does the future of the marketing team structure look like. But let's talk about an obvious one, which is publishing content, right? Why shouldn't everyone in the organization just be able to publish content onto the website? And the answer is compliance, regulation, workflow, all those kind of things. So in a way, that situation that we absolutely can democratize the ability to publish things into staging. It just creates more of a bottleneck at the moment for our compliance organization. So there's a little bit about how far can we stretch this when we are part of a wider organization where different departments are on different journeys. I think some things will remain specialisms. I think, to your point, I think paid media will probably remain a specialism. I think there's a lot of kind of built up knowledge in there. I also, we see paid media today being a declining part of what we spend money on, and that's not. Someone asked a question about this in the last session, about how are we seeing our paid search budgets change right now. We're not seeing our budget change, but we're seeing our forecast change because we're not able to spend the money that we're budgeting for it because we're just getting fewer clicks on the ads, and we're just beginning to see that in programmatic as well. We're unable to spend the budgets that we're putting out because we're just having fewer people kind of hitting these things. So again, that feels like it's a specialism. I kind of want to keep that centralized, but. And then the last one is that we have been talking about a lot is we've just kind of onboarded with Adobe and Firefly, and does that allow people across the organization to begin to generate their own creative? And the answer is no. Again, because Firefly is incredibly powerful and really, really great, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're stretching away from brand guidelines. You can be producing all sorts of things. So again, we're kind of democratizing access to certain areas, but we're keeping certain areas specialisms. But by making those specialisms more efficient, there's more bandwidth for them to be doing work on behalf of the wider organization. I think I'm out of time, but
yes,
I'm out of time. Okay. That was very clear. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jon.